All right. Hi, everyone. We are back today with Stacy Berman, and we are also joined by Jenny Harding and Dani Coleman. And today, Stacy is going to be giving myself, Jenny, and Dani the character armor readings that we gave away in our big giveaway over the last few weeks. So I'm really excited to dive in. I'm also a little nervous to learn about my character armor, but excited because then we get tools, and we all know with awareness comes power. So with that, Stacy, why don't you hop on in and just kind of remind everyone what these readings are about, and then we can dive on in.
Okay, sounds good. First of all, thank you, Kelly, for having me on again. I'm super psyched to be here again and to do this reading for you and Jenny and Dani and all your listeners. So character armor or character structure is basically the idea that when we have intense and or chronic enough experiences during developmental times in our lives, specifically from in utero to about 7 or 8 years old, when those experiences are unresolved emotionally, they don't just disappear. They actually get locked into the tissue of the body, the posture of the body, and then affect the musculature of the body. And so by looking at a person's posture and movement, you could start understanding and kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of what their emotional and psychological obstacles have been throughout their life. So everyone typically will have 3 primary character armors that show up at different times in different experiences or situations. For the purpose of this call, I've picked the one that stood out the most to me. But now just a caveat to that is that we're all mixed of different, like we're never 100% this or 100% that. We're mixed of different character armors, just as we're mixed of different experiences and emotions and all that stuff. So as I give you this character armor, just keep in mind that this is an extreme version of what that character armor would be if it didn't have other influences. Does that all make sense? Okay, so we'll start with Jenny. So there were actually quite a few interesting things as I was looking at your structure and the way that you were moving. And even the funny thing is you could tell things about the face. So I'm going to just jump right in. I'm going to tell you, so I'll give you the rundown of what this type of structure, like a general pattern that this structure gets stuck in life. We'll talk about some of the central issues, the orientation to the self, the rights, the developmental stage, the identity, and the demon. And when I say demon, I mean an emotion that shows up during developmental time that creates the holding pattern in the body that I'm reading. Okay. So Jenny, and also when I read this to you, I'm going to ask, like, does this sound right? Does this not sound right? What? And it's okay if some of it doesn't sound right, but if some of it like really resonates, then we know we're on the right path. Yeah, I think that's it for now. Okay, so Jenny, you are what is considered the endurer structure. Okay, so now I see you smile already. So I feel like maybe it's resonating already. Okay, so the endurer structure is basically locked in a pattern of outwardly pleasing, but inwardly resisting. And so this type of structure is strong, loyal, and you can endure difficulty very well. But there's an issue in terms of your personal power, will, and autonomy. So how does that sit with you so far?
Yeah, so far that is pretty spot on. And I think I've taken some kind of a test before and gotten the endurer. So just interesting. Yeah. And I come from a history of definitely people pleasing and
okay. Exactly. Yeah. So and that's exactly it. So the people pleasing is like you outwardly please, but then inwardly there's some part of you, because you're not putting your own autonomy and personal power and will at least equal with other people. So you'll do for them, but then some part of your body will resist that. Sometimes it might show up actually as like digestive disorders. It might show up as eating disorder. I don't know if any of that sounds right to you, but that's stomach, like issues around the stomach. Go ahead.
That's just so interesting. I think that this really stems from my childhood, and a lot of this is stuff I'm becoming aware of now as I'm, doing my work. But yeah, throughout childhood, I know that I like self-soothed emotionally with food, and I had like disordered eating throughout my whole childhood. So this feels like it really came from my family, and that is how I coped, basically. Right. So
exactly. Okay, so there we go. So that's it. That's the endurer structure showing up. So basically a message that you would have received at that level. So the developmental stage would be somewhere between about 18 months old and 4 years old. So there was something that happened, either something intense or something chronic that happened during that time that interrupted this stage of development. So if we think of an 18-month-old or an 18-month-old, that's the beginning of it. They're just starting to like locomote more, like they're able to crawl, they're starting to stand, being a little floppy on their feet. This is the stage where they learn to follow their impulse towards things. So that's when like they see a cup, they crawl towards it, they pick it up, they mouth it, they do all the things, and then they look over there. And so this is the stage that the interruption would have come for you. So I don't know what happened at that point, or as an example, it might not even be, like obviously there could be big T trauma, I don't know, but another version of that might be if your impulse was interrupted in some way. So as an example of having your impulse interrupted would be maybe you have an impulse to crawl towards something, and then instead of you crawling towards it, maybe a caregiver just brings it over to you. So you don't ever get to develop your own personal autonomy and like following your own impulses. Or another one might be if you have something and like, have you ever seen a little kid like give you a gift, and then maybe your parent might or a caregiver might like be busy and be stressed or busy and not have time to look at that thing. And so you'll get the message that like this impulse is not received. And so you might give up, or you might try to do something to get their attention, but it's again, to get their attention rather than their authentic attunement to you. Does this feel right in any way?
It does. It definitely does. And as I've reflected on my childhood, like I can't remember that far back.
Right.
But I do remember exactly that, like just trying to receive love in ways that weren't intuitive.
Right.
And so I can see how like my intuitive ways could have been interrupted before that in order for me to like develop that pattern, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So the demon around this is in some way that is shame, the emotion of shame. And so in some way, the little version of you felt shame as a result of following those impulses. And again, might not be intentional. Like it might not be, oh, you should be ashamed, little girl. It might just be like maybe your caregiver was busy or whatever. And so you interpreted that as, oh, something must be wrong with me because they're not interested. So it's not, it's not a blaring big teeth type of thing, but that shame would be an emotion to start exploring if you haven't already. Okay. So then there's also a breakdown, which we could go over, of chakra and bioenergy imbalances. So your first, which is the root chakra, safety, security, stability, would be a bit excessive. So you tend to feel stuck sometimes. You might be stubborn. I don't know if you are. Usually these are all quite sensitive ones, because of course, when you're like, you're stubborn, people are like, no, I'm not. I'm like, okay.
No, it's great. It's great. It's good to reflect on that kind of thing, you know.
Yeah.
I don't ever take that kind of thing personally. It's like, oh, am I stubborn? You know.
And then there might be issues with boundaries as well, for this type of structure. Your second sacral chakra would be deficient. So there may be fear around intimacy. There may be emotional numbness. Now, that's not to say that you don't feel things, but that you might be numbing things out that you don't want to feel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's very true. That's very
Right.
true. And I've been working with my chakras a little bit lately, and reading the book Eastern Body, Western Mind.
Yes.
And everything she says about sacral deficiency, like, is spot on for me. Totally resonates. So,
Yeah.
and I've noticed I have a lot of patterns around numbing my emotions, and I've had, you know, like addictive tendencies because of that, like trying to escape feeling.
Right.
So yeah, that really resonates too.
Okay. Yeah. And then the third.
Can I butt in for 1 second? And because that developmental time too, that's really the developmental time of the sacral chakra, and I think into the solar plexus, right? So I love how you bring this all together, and I think that makes so much sense. Yeah, we love the chakras on this podcast.
We love
chakras all day.
So the third chakra would be split. Could be excessive, could be deficient, could be both. And so that's where the energy gets bound in the belly, and that's like where the eating disorder kind of thing stems from. There might be issues around anger, but so depending on if you're excessive, if you lean more excessive or deficient. If you're excessive, you will have outbursts of anger. If you're deficient, it'll be blocked anger. So
I'm laughing because I'm in a coach training at the moment, and we do all of this work with energy, and basically my energetic pattern under stress is to feel anger, but then it turns inward toward myself. So I get angry at myself.
So that's the exact pattern of outwardly resisting outwardly pleasing, inwardly resisting. So you do the thing, but then you're angry at yourself for doing the thing.
Exactly, because like I'll express my anger, and then I'll be like, oh, it's wrong to express anger. I should feel ashamed that.
And that's the shame.
Exactly, like I wasn't just like a pleasurable presence, you know?
Right.
So
Right.
That, yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So here we are. Might have issues around self-esteem. And again, that could, when we talk about that, it might be like an obvious thing. Some people with self-esteem issues, it's quite obvious, but it also might be that it's so blocked that you don't recognize it. So you make up for it by being whatever it is that you're trying to, like, if there's a part of you that doesn't feel intelligent, well, then you overdo it and become the most intelligent. Again, that's an extreme example, but that there might be issues around that to explore. And that's connected also to the shame, right? So why, if you're angry, why would that make you feel ashamed? Anger is a healthy emotion, actually. It's a healthy kind of action-oriented emotion. So, and it helps you with boundaries. So it's actually a healthy emotion. Then why do you feel shame? So that's connected to the self-esteem issues that might show up. But you have very good discipline and you have an intense focus of energy.
great. I wouldn't necessarily have said that about myself, so that's cool.
Okay, cool. And then the fourth chakra is deficient. So your autonomy needs are kind of seen as antithetical to love. So it's interesting because you said you're a people pleaser. Now, when we fall into this people pleaser trap, we are putting somebody else's needs above our own. And if we are not in touch with our own needs, we are not actually being authentic to ourselves. So even if you are in relationships where you feel love, but you're actually not being authentic to yourself, then that autonomy need is not being met. So that's why does that make sense? Where like you have to, in order to be in a fully loving relationship, I'm not just talking about romantic or anything like that, but in order to be in a fully loving relationship, you need to be able to be authentically you, that's your autonomy, in connection with someone else. If you can be authentically you, but not in connection with yourself, then autonomy is antithetical to love.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
And if you can't be your autonomous or authentic self within a relationship, then you can't be yourself. So that's where it comes in, as where your authenticity or your autonomy is antithetical to a loving relationship. Does that make sense for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
It does. And I've struggled with relationships for this reason. And I tend to be sometimes a loner because of it. Like I have an avoidant relationship.
So the next one tends to isolate.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's why, right? Because this part of you is wanting to be authentic, and it recognizes that it can't do it or it believes it can't do it in relationship. And so it isolates in order to maintain the autonomy. Now, over the long term, of course, that doesn't work because we're connected beings. So that's something to think about and explore.
Yeah.
So you tend to isolate. You might also, as a result, develop a lot of grief because you want to be in connection, but there's that part of you who believes if they are in connection, they can't be themselves. And so you isolate, and then the isolation creates grief. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's literally the pattern. When I experienced depression in my life, it was exactly that. It was because I was isolating.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Like because I didn't feel safe in relationship to be myself. But then eventually, you're alone, and that's depressing after a while. Like we are social beings. So
exactly.
absolutely.
Exactly. And then similar along those lines is that you might see love as conditional, right? So you'll only love me if I am this way, but if I am me, then you won't love me. And that may not be true, but that's the kind of deeper belief that you may have. And then the fifth chakra would be deficient. So there's something about the energy is choked here, meaning that unable to, especially in relationship, unable to express your own needs, wants, impulses. So while you may feel it, you don't express it. And that's when you were talking about the coaching thing, where you feel anger, but then you make you shame yourself for feeling the anger. I should be this way. So your expression is choked here. Does that make sense?
It does. It definitely does. Did you say anything about the third chakra?
I did. So that was all the energy blocked in that area, the outwardly pleasing, inwardly resisting, stubborn, self-esteem, possibly self-esteem issues, good discipline.
Right. Okay.
And then another thing, which is not within this character armor, but that I noticed on you in your videos and your picture was, so one of your other character structures, which I'm not going to go too deep into, but Dani is fully, so you'll hear some of this, the need structure. And so the thing that I noticed on you is, at least in the pictures, and I'm looking now and I can see it a little bit, is in the need structure, one of your eyebrows is a little higher than the other one. And even now, you just did it. So your left eyebrow is a little higher than the other one. So this need structure is, so what that means is there's a distrusting or skeptical nature within connections sometimes. So it's like, what that indicates to me is that whatever that developmental need was during that time, you received it, but then for some reason it was withdrawn. So you know what it feels like, but then it was taken away. So now you have this skeptical nature about, will my, can I be myself within relationship? And so but that's based off of the need structure. So not believing that your needs will be met in contact, in connection with people.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but how does an eyebrow tell you this?
Well, I have my ways. Okay, so the eyebrow is just, it's actually when you watch babies. So the need structure has two primary facial expressions. So the need structure is, and you'll see babies do this, like the initial one would be when they're like kind of like needing and pleading. So their eyes are like pleading with you, the mouth is slightly open, because that's like that when they want to suckle, that's a need that they need food, right? So they kind of want to suckle, and their eyes will be kind of like needing of, or like wanting something from caregiver. And then when, for example, a need was met, but then withdrawn, or another example might be with a need structure. So Dani, this is yours. I'm going to go into it in a sec, but just so you take note of it. So in the need structure, as an example, so we have lots of needs as babies and as adults, right? We need food, we need rest, we need to be warm if we're cold, we need to be cool if we're too hot, we need connection with our caregivers. Now, if, for example, and this I know is a common thing for some people anyway, let's say the baby is crying because they're tired, but instead of being put down to sleep, they get food, right? So they're crying, the caregiver is not attuned with them, they don't know why it's crying. So I'm just going to give you a need. I'm going to replace whatever need it is. Well, they're not thinking they're replacing it, but they're thinking, oh, you must be hungry, here's some food. So as a baby, you interpret that, and again, this is not conscious, this is all very subconscious processing, but you interpret that as a need is fulfilled, but it's not the need that I needed to be fulfilled. So now I become skeptical. So now I'm like, so that's the, like, when somebody looks skeptically, they're like kind of, I mean, I can't really do it so well, but you'll see a child, and we all pass through these phases. So we'll all pass through the early, like, wanting, pleading look, and then we'll pass through the skeptical, which is, it's healthy. That's where our discernment comes from. We want to be able to, this is good for me, this is bad for me. So it's not a negative thing. It's just that when it gets stuck in there, then that's becomes a predisposition. So it's like that skeptical look. So that's where that comes from.
So cool. I love it.
Can that ever, like, so as you're saying that, I was thinking, could that ever turn inward and like being skeptical of your own ability to like know what you need?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that is part, and actually, so it's going to get to Dani when we go into it. So listen to this, because this is one of your other character structures. Like I said, I only did the primary one, but so you'll hear it, but that's exactly what that means. It's you're not in touch with your own needs. And so you become skeptical. And you don't pay attention to different signals or different impulses that your body might have, like sleeping when you're tired, or eating when you're hungry, or not eating when you're not hungry, those kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, is it okay if I ask another question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or it's kind of like a reflection, but there's a question in here somewhere. So like, as you said, like if a parent gives their child food when it needs sleep or something, like I feel that way. Like I will think I'm hungry when I really need to sleep. Like that, literally exactly that in my adult life. And I'm wondering, can that, like, I don't know, that exact pattern last? Like, could I have
It does last.
used,
It does.
Okay.
That's what this is what all of this character structure is about, is that how the patterns that were imprinted as children continue throughout our adult life until we bring it to consciousness and start doing the healing work. But that's exactly it. Yes, absolutely. The patterns do continue, and this is how you notice them. So yes, you just nailed it just now.
Okay, wow. I feel like I have that exact situation that your example was.
Okay, cool. So then I'll give you some healing practices. So this is the healing practices for specifically the Endurer, but when we get to Dani, it'll be specifically for the need structure. So you'll be able to kind of take parts of both. So one of them would be grounding within emotional contact. So it's so any, how do I say this? Any quote unquote trauma, whether it's big T trauma or little T trauma. And when I say little T trauma, it's just little T trauma is anything that you didn't receive as a child in the way that you needed to receive it. So it's not abusive necessarily, it's just you didn't get what you needed in the right way. So grounding in, and so because any trauma happens in contact with your primary caregiver, any healing, does that make sense so far? Okay, so then any healing is going to happen also in some type of emotional contact, not necessarily with your caregiver. It could be with a friend, partner, therapist, a healer, anything like that. As an example, so you're the Endurer. So it's easy to be autonomous when you're alone, but can you be autonomous in relationship with someone else? That's where your structure has the issue, right? So when you do these healing exercises, the real test of if it's working or not is it working when I'm in contact with someone else? Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. Do you have a question about it?
I do actually.
Go ahead.
So working on grounding.
Yes.
When I feel emotion in relationship.
No, so okay, so grounding and in contact with someone else. So as an example, if your structure is the Endurer structure, and we've already said that you tend to not be able to be yourself within relationship, right? So you're not grounded in yourself within relationship. So then one thing that you might be able to do is practice a grounding exercise while in contact with someone else. So it might be a coach, it might be a healer, it might be a friend. So a grounding exercise would be simply, for this character structure, a grounding exercise would be standing with both feet on the floor as a baby would. So when they first start moving, you'll see their feet are very wide, right? Because they don't have the stability. So they're like a little, moving around. So you want to plant your feet in the floor. You can kind of rock back and forth, because again, if you think of a child, when they're first starting to walk, they'll walk on their toes and then they'll drop down. So what this is doing, it's not just a grounding exercise, but it's actually activating the muscles that started coming online during that developmental stage. So doing that in contact with someone else. So let's say, as an example, you're working with a coach and you're grounding, right? You're doing the motions, your feet are a little bit wider, noticing in your body if what's happening. Is there anger? Is there shame? Is this uncomfortable? What's my impulse? What's my resistance? What's going on within myself? Then you might say something like, it's okay to express myself, or it's okay to be me. Something like that within contact, and then noticing how that feels for you. And so that the noticing how it feels for you is going to say a lot more about where you need to like focus. But so I'm watching you now. How does that feel for you when I say that? What's going on for you?
Yeah, well, I love it. First of all, that sounds like a beautiful exercise. I'm comforted because I already practiced the first half of that, of the
Okay.
playing, and I actually think about myself as a baby and like learning to
Yeah.
walk. So
Yeah.
it's funny. But the added piece of the affirmation, and then also doing it with somebody else, that's new.
Okay.
And I think that
Yeah.
that would be really, really cool to explore. So
Yeah. So that's one thing. Another thing would be an exercise, and this is quite fun, of following your impulses in terms of what you want, and also because you're in the need structure, what you need. So usually when I work with people, I can do this sometimes. We might do it in session, but I'll have them do exercises where like pick 2 hours out of the day, or once a week, 2 hours, where you're just following the impulse. And what that means is, so you might sit or you might lay in the bed, or it might be first thing in the morning, right? So you wake up, you open your eyes, and you wait until you have an impulse. That might be to go pee, that might be to brush your teeth, that might be to like, oh, what's this thing? And you literally spend a certain amount of time following the impulse to do whatever your body wants you to do. So remember what I said, that your thing is within relationship, you lose yourself, basically. You're not able to be your authentic self. So this is teaching your body, literally in real time, what does it want right now? What does it want to do? And when you listen to what it wants to do, then you're taking back your own personal power and autonomy rather than giving it to someone else. Does that make sense?
yeah, I love that. And I love that it's grounded in the body.
Yeah, I'm always going to be grounding it in the body, because remember, we can know here what all of our issues are, but until our body gets the message, it doesn't really fucking matter. Oh, excuse me. I mean, how many
It's allowed
times
here.
Okay, good. It's like, how many times do we know? We know, like, I know I have these issues, but that doesn't stop me from doing them until my body gets the message that it's okay. And so all of these practices are really working with the body. Like it's good that you understand what you're doing, but the body understanding is going to be a lot more important than the mind understanding in terms of overall change in how your body is processing, body mind is processing things. Does that all make sense?
It does, yeah. I don't want to take like too much of the time of this, but
Yeah.
I do have a question
Yeah.
about like embodiment practices.
Yeah.
I have a very overactive mind, and I've struggled with anxiety because of it. And I'm working on embodiment a lot recently, and it's so helpful. But I still like there'll be days where it's easier and days where it's harder to be in my body. And I'm wondering if you have any tips on if you're having one of those harder days where the mind is more active and trying to overtake you.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips on just letting your body be the leader?
So I'm going to give you, this is another one of the healing practices that I was going to suggest, but then you brought it up. So I'm definitely going to say it. So vigorous exercise or martial arts are going to help.
I love
So,
that.
okay.
I love
Because it's, first of all, what it's going to do is it's going to literally, when you do intense workouts, it's going to not shut off the prefrontal cortex, but it's going to decrease the activity, which is where the monkey mind anxiety comes from. So it's literally going to give your brain a little bit of a time to like not go offline, but that part of your brain to like decrease in activity. Also, as you know, if you're doing intense workouts, you literally cannot do math because that part of your brain is shut off, is decreased in activity. So this will decrease that anxiety, that chatteriness, and bring you into your body. You can't think of anything else except for what you're doing right now. Martial arts is similar, depending on which type you do, but it's like it does bring your attention to the here and now, because you're learning what I call like a new language of the body, so that those are really good. And that's also specifically for the Endura character, because you have this energy that's locked. It helps to bring it up and bring it down into the floor, so it doesn't stay locked in the system. It gives it an outlet, so just in terms of bioenergy fields anyway, that's how that works, but that'll also allow you to be in your body. So that would be a great thing. So if you do like a grounding emotional exercise, and then when you start feeling, or even before, you don't have to wait till you start feeling, but have a regular practice of some sort of vigorous exercise or martial art practice, that will help to decrease that functioning of the system, and then following the impulses exercise.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I love all of that. I'm really excited to incorporate that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then if you have any questions, you have my email address. If you have any questions going forward, feel free to reach out and just keep me posted on like how it's going, because things will come up. Like when you'll notice when you do the grounding in emotional contact, things will come up. And if nothing comes up, that's also an indication that something is being blocked. So, just noticing, and then that'll help us like, okay, if this came up or that came up, okay, what can we work with now? How do we get this to kind of release itself? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much, Stacy. I will.
Thank you so much, Dani. Awesome. All right. So now let us move on.
Next up, Dani.
Next up, can I call you Dani? Is that okay?
Yeah, please.
Okay, cool. So you are what is called the need structure. So for the need structure, there was some sort of interruption in your needs and your emotions being met. You're strongly oriented towards emotional merging. So you like to merge with your friends, or you're giving. It might come out in two different ways. You might be like super giving, you might be merging. Sometimes issues around understanding your own needs. And there might be something around if your needs are met, then so are mine. So like your subconscious believes that, like, you might not know your own needs, but if I'm satisfying your needs, then that's good for me. Does that make sense so far to you?
Yes. Particularly just kind of feeling like in my earlier childhood, I did feel like most of my needs were met. And I felt like pretty severely disrupted at a point in time. So that resonated with me. And also, yeah, I didn't really think of that until now, but I definitely think I am the type of person that if like, I'm like, oh, if you're good, then we're good, Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the central issue around this one, this character structure, is your emotions and your needs. Mm-hmm. So what that means is, do I know what my own needs are? Can I feel my own needs? And also, can I experience my own emotions? And again, that doesn't mean not able to experience emotions. That just means there might be some emotions that are harder for you to experience. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
So the orientation of this one is self-gratification, and that's not in a kind of self-centered kind of way, but if we think of a child at the developmental time is like 6 months to 2 years. So in a very real way, that stage of development, or that character structure, is self-centered. You are self-centered at 6 to 2. Like, that's just, you believe the world revolves around you. That's why that, like, right, when peekaboo, you actually think you disappear. You think, but that's because that's how our brain functions at the time. Uh-huh. So the orientation of that structure is self-gratification, or not being able to gratify yourself or satisfy yourself. The rights of this character structure are right to feel and to need things. Developmental stage, like I said, between 6 months and 2 years. the identity is the emotional identity. So this is when the emotional identity comes online. So the child starts experiencing their emotions as their own in a very limited way, but that's when it starts coming online. Up until that point in utero, and the first character structure, which is partly you, is called the existence structure. And we're still the child still experiences itself very much as its mother, or connected, like it's a union at that point. And in the need structure is when it starts individuating a little bit. You still feel connected, but there's a little bit of, oh, these are my emotions. And the demon around this is the feeling of guilt. So how are you with guilt? Does that come up for you?
Yeah, I definitely don't feel like I necessarily have the space to like establish my needs with others sometimes. And when I do, I feel guilty or wrong about it, for sure.
So exactly. So that's that. Yeah, that's that character structure. Now, do you have any questions so far about it?
I don't think so. Not yet.
Okay.
I'm just eager.
Okay, excellent. So this character structure will go into the chakra system, bioenergy fields. So the first one is deficient. So there might be feelings of like emptiness or experiencing abandonment, feeling abandoned. There might be issues around never feeling satisfied or fear of letting go, because you already don't feel satisfied. So if you let go, then you're definitely not going to be satisfied. How does that feel for you?
Yeah. Abandonment has been like a huge word for me for a long time. Anytime I've like done energy healing and things like that, which I think goes back to, like having these needs and like feeling like my needs were met, and then kind of like getting that taken away, and like these feelings of abandonment. So yeah, that really resonates with me.
So that is funny. So you have the same eyebrow thing that Jenny does, which is that distrustfulness around the needs being met. When I saw that,
when you said that the first time, my heart started beating. I was like, this is a lot. Like, feels like it's being directed at me as well.
Exactly. So that's I saw the eyebrow. I was like, hey now.
Amazing.
So this one, like your mom or your caregiver would only half meet your needs at some point during that developmental stage. So again, like what you said, like you had it, but then for some reason it was taken away, and now you're distrustful of it being met, of those needs being met. The second chakra would be excessive. So that means like there might be a feeling dependent in relationships, or sometimes needy, depending. I'm needy sometimes, so just in case. Sometimes people are like, okay. Okay. You do crave touch and nurturance. You're very emotionally responsive. And there's some like underlying feeling of being deprived.
Yes.
How does that sit with you?
Yeah. I do find myself needing quite a bit of like affirmation. And I think that's kind of like with the nourishing, like I need to be nourished like verbally and affirmed. So
exactly. Then the third chakra would be deficient. So there's a bit of underchargedness in your personal power spot. So there might be a lack of aggression. And what I mean by that is not like an aggressive person necessarily, but like aggression, like I was saying to Jenny, aggression or anger are actually positive. I mean, they're not experienced as positive maybe to society, but they're great emotions to spark action. So there might be a lack of aggression or anger in your system. Also might be issues around self-esteem. There might be issues around feeling like you're easily discouraged, because you don't have that fire. And actually the solar plexus is the seat of fire. So you don't have that fire. So if like something happens and you just feel discouraged, how does that sit with you?
I find myself feeling discouraged pretty easily by others. And yeah, also kind of going back to like when I was saying I don't necessarily always feel comfortable holding space for myself. I especially don't feel comfortable holding space for myself when it's kind of aggressive, which is something I really have been trying to work on. So
so that's good. So we can, I'll give you something to work on that in terms of the healing practices. Awesome. Because that's, again, the aggressive energy is not, I mean, we have, a malfunction in society where some people are overly aggressive, and that's not what we're going for. But how do we harness that aggression in order to spark movement and action instead of just kind of collapsing because you feel discouraged?
Absolutely.
The fourth chakra is excessive. So that's the heart chakra. There's some sort of belief of like, love will solve everything. Yes. Okay.
It sounds like the flower child in me or something.
Yeah. You get very attached in relationships, but you're also quite loyal. You're very loving, kind, compassionate, and understanding, but also you might feel rejected quite easily.
Loyalty. Yeah, I feel like I've been commonly described as a pretty like fiercely loyal person. But yeah, it becomes problematic at times, I feel, when perhaps I'm being loyal to someone who doesn't necessarily need my loyalty, or
Right. So. And that's exactly it too. It's like loyalty. So if we look at the need structure is if your needs are met, my needs are met. So I'm being loyal to you, but I'm not being loyal to myself because I don't even know what my needs are. And so what we want to do here is we want to get you to start feeling, acknowledging, connecting with your needs and your emotions so that in relationship, you can still maintain yourself.
Yeah, I really love the way you just said that, because I don't know if you heard me, but I was like, maybe they don't need it. And I'm like, wait, maybe I don't need it. I didn't even like think about that. And you were like, but maybe you don't need it. And I'm like,
shit. Yeah. I left myself out of the equation again. again. Okay. And then the fifth chakra would be excessive sometimes. So you might fill empty spaces with oral activity. So it might be eating, it might be talking, it might be holding back the eating. So there's something related to oral, because if we think about it, the need structure is when like the baby the baby's eating when it's, just born, but at like 3 to 6 months, they're starting to do that. So like grasp for the mom. And I use these are the fingers that first come online in the structure, the pinky fingers, and then the rest kind of follow as reflex, but these fingers are not consciously online. These are the first ones, as well as the lips. Here, I'm going to skip ahead to some of the healing practices. One of the healing practices for this need structure. And again, so the whole point is getting the body to understand its own needs and wants. So part of this is, and this is a kind of fun one, which maybe you don't want to do in a restaurant, but you could do like with your friends or just on your own. So a child at that point starts, its own needs start coming online. It starts becoming conscious of it. And so one of the things you'll see with the baby is they take in the mother's breast or a bottle. So they suck in, and then when they don't want anymore, they go. So that's they're in touch with their own needs. Like, I want to suckle. I don't want anymore. So this is a fun exercise to do with different things. Like, you can start with little things, like maybe it is food. Do I want a donut? No. And again, it's not, or do I want, and then once you recognize like these needs and wants in your body, you can also start doing this with people. Not that you want to do it in their face, but like, practicing this, like there will be some gut reaction to it. And again, it takes time to kind of get in touch with those subtle signals, but you'll know, these muscles will know, do I want it or do I not want it? And you'll see what gives the body the yes with people. But again, the first step is like just using it in relation to simple things like, do I want this food? Do I want to, what is my body's impulse at this moment? Do I want it? Do I not want it? Does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense.
So we just skip forward to a healing practice.
Right, but we all see Dani just at a restaurant looking at the menu.
You could do it with your friends. At least you're like, I'm learning my own impulse, my own needs right now.
But what are you doing? Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. But it's such a simple thing, but this is how the body learns what it wants and what it doesn't want. And so we can reverse engineer. We think that like, oh, if we have a conscious understanding of what we want and what we don't want, that'll be easy to translate into our body, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Right. We can reverse engineer it and teach our body to start connecting what it needs and wants through these little activities. And then that eventually changes the conscious mind. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense.
So the fifth chakra, like I said, is a bit excessive. Sometimes it's really hard because you're the skeptical type. You have that skepticism. You will. So I'm going to say this: you don't ask directly for your needs. Now, some structures, some people in the need structure don't even know what their own needs are. For you, and again, this is in the extreme, for we're all a mix of all these, is what I'm saying. So for your specific one, because you have the eyebrow skepticism thing, you probably know what your needs are, but you can't ask for them directly. How does that sound to you? Yeah.
Yes. I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking that I know what my needs are. I feel like I do intuitively. But yeah, I have no idea how I would mobilize that.
Yeah. Oh. And so, and that's even interesting because we're never 100% one of anything. We're a combination. So because the need structure is your primary imbalance, when I'd also say there's probably stuff around you not knowing what your needs are. So you think, so there's a good combination there, but your primary one is, intuitively knowing, but not being able to say or mobilize, like you said. Yes. Okay. Do you have any questions so far around that?
No, I don't think so. I think I'm just receiving.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so we'll go then to healing practices. So one of the healing practices was just that exercise that I told you about. And even doing that on its own without anything in mind, you might get a sense of, spitting out, saying, I don't want this, like in action. I notice that my body feels anxious, or it collapses, or it, or whatever it feels. That in itself might be a really good practice for your body, because you can see, I can take in, but I can't say no. Okay, so then that means we need to start learning ways of saying no in relationship.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes. I was kind of wondering if the word like anxiousness was going to come up, because I do feel quite anxious. Like I'm a very anxious person. And now that you're saying it like that, in like talking about it in regards to that practice, like, wow, maybe a lot of my anxiousness is revolved around my needs, and I just never thought about that.
Ding, 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 ding.
Wow. Incredible.
Right.
I would have never made that connection.
Right. So now let's put this in perspective, because you just brought it up, right? Now, if a baby doesn't get its needs met,
Mhm.
or had at one point and then stopped getting its needs met, what emotion do you think it would experience in the nervous system? What if you're hungry and it doesn't, and you don't get food, or you're tired and you don't sleep, or you're cold and you're not warmed up?
Anger,
What do you
disappointment, frustration.
Frustration. Do you think it might get like stress or anxious?
Yeah, probably.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's where that anxiety comes from.
Mhm.
And then what you're doing, and not just you, everybody does this, but I'm using you because you're here.
Mhm.
You're here. We're talking about you.
Yeah.
Is so now what you're doing to yourself within relationship, even within relationship to yourself, is you're not giving yourself your own needs, and therefore you're then enhancing the anxiety, because that part of you is like, oh, well, I don't get the needs that I have, so now I'm going to be angry, I'm going to be frustrated, I'm going to be anxious, all that stuff. So you're perpetuating the cycle that began when you were young, therefore enhancing the anxiety that came online at that point.
Yes.
Okay. So then a good practice for you, since we're here, is now we can use the anxiety as a signal to let you know that a need that you have is not being met. So when we think of our needs are very basic: food, water, sleep, shelter, connection, I mean, with temperature wise, like these are very basic, to go to the bathroom. So these are all basic, right? There's a distinction between needs and wants. And so when you feel the anxiety, my suggestion would be maybe check in with your body and see, what do I need right now? Do I need something right now? Do I need rest? Do I need food? Do I need to check in with my breathing? Do I need to reach out to a friend? Do I need to connect with myself? So these are all different needs that you could start playing with. But now it's a beautiful thing, because what is anxiety, what is can be kind of overwhelming sometimes, or just irritating to like always be anxious. Now we can say, well, thank you, anxiety, because you're teaching me that right now my body doesn't feel like I'm taking care of its needs. So how can I offer it whatever it's asking for? Does that make sense to you?
Yes, that makes a lot of sense.
And how does it sit? Like, does it feel like, yes, this is something?
Yeah, I was kind of, just as I was listening, like thinking about like my most anxious moments and like what I would kind of think that I was needing in those moments. And yeah, like I wasn't giving myself that. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so when you're not giving yourself that, you're just reinforcing the anxiety.
Exactly.
Because that little person, that little kid inside of you is just like, see, I'm not going to get it. And now I'm even more distrustful.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's something that you can work with. So we have that exercise, see how it feels in the system. We have the signal. Okay, when I feel anxious, check in. What are my needs right now? Then another one is following the impulses. So Jenny, we did it in following the impulses in terms of what like you want to explore, but Dani, following the impulses of your needs. So as an example, I regularly have to pee and I don't get up to pee. I'm not following that impulse. So an exercise that you would do would be really like checking in with your body as often as you remember, and checking, well, what does my body need right now? Like, do you regularly not eat when you're hungry? Do you regularly not sleep when you're tired? Do you instead of sleeping, eat? Or instead of reaching out for someone or connecting with yourself, do you use something else to avoid it? So it's a similar thing with following the impulses, but specifically with your bodily needs. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, absolutely.
So that's going to, and then also the other step of that is when, this will be a good exercise because we've been talking about the anxiousness, the anxiety that you have is, so this developmental stage is related to your needs, your bodily human needs, and your emotions. So when we're talking about childhood development, what we want to do is we want to attune to their emotion and then take care of their need. So what I mean by that, if a baby is crying because they're hungry, what we want to do as caregivers, if we have kids, I don't have kids, but if we did, what we want to do is not just give them food to soothe their emotion. We want to acknowledge the emotion that they're having, meet them in that emotion. I see you're angry, or I see you're grumpy because you're hungry and you're not fed. And then we give them the need. Now, why this is important is because we want them to be able to, what's the word I'm looking for? Acknowledge their own emotions, and then be able to take care of their own needs, or take care of their own needs in relationship. And we don't want these things connected. We see that they are connected. You're frustrated or you're anxious because you're hungry and you're not being fed. But if every time you're hungry, you get anxious, then these are blended aspects, let's say. We want to de-blend them so that we can validate our own emotions. Oh, I'm feeling anxious because I'm hungry. Not like, oh my God, I'm anxious. What is it that I need? We want to be able to have those two distinct parts as adults. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. As an example, so you said you need affirmation. You find that you need affirmation in relationship, right? So this type of structure, when these things are blended together, then one might feel like if you say, I want this, and they say, no, I'm not going to give you that, then you're going to take it on as you're being rejected, right? Whereas if you're like, okay, I see that you're not going to give me this, or you say no to me, okay, that might make me upset, but I recognize that I'm not being rejected, or you're not rejecting me, you're just rejecting this. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's why it's important to kind of de-blend these two starting at that time. So now, because we're already in the stage where you're an adult and they're blended together, what you can do here is when you're following the impulse of your needs, you can first check in. What's the emotion that I'm feeling right now? Like, let's say you have an impulse to pee. I mean, this is an innocuous one, but let's say you have an impulse to pee, and you check in. What emotions am I feeling right now? Am I frustrated? Am I anxious? Am I, whatever it is? And then you follow that impulse. Or if it's, I'm hungry.
Right.
What do I feel? I'm frustrated right now. So again, we start just de-blending the emotion from the need so that we don't kind of combine them and then, oh my God, you're rejecting me, or whatever it is. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. I really like the idea of kind of compartmentalizing things a bit more, because I think the affirmation example was amazing and it really spoke to me, because I do kind of like roll this all into a big lump, like, oh, I was rejected and I'm going to be abandoned now. And like all of these emotions for something that could have just been like taken at face value and like navigated that way. So yeah, I really liked that example. That was awesome.
Yeah, exactly. And I just also would say, I would reframe that. It's not necessarily a compartmentalizing, because that also indicates like a cutting off in some way.
Yeah,
it's just the de-blending, so that you don't go from here to now you're rejecting and abandoning me. It's just the recognizing, oh, I have anxiety. I'm hungry, but you're not rejecting me, or whatever it is, right? So we don't ever want to compartmentalize or repress. We just want to deep blend, because then what that allows is, it allows us to respond rather than react. So if somebody says no to you, and then you go into automatic, oh, you're rejecting and abandoning me, that's a reaction. That's an unconscious process that just happens automatically based off of experiences as a kid that got reinforced over your lifetime.
Yes.
But what we can do is, oh, I'm feeling that anxiety. What is the anxiety trying to teach me? Okay, let me look at my needs. What do I need right now? And then that's not a reflection on me as a person. That's just, I see that process happening that has been present in me for forever. And now I can just take care of my own needs instead of being like, you're abandoning me.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So we have that. And then let me see, because I have a few other ones. One of these, so I'll ask you, okay, this is another one. Well, there's two others, so we'll see which feels better to you. So now, one of the exercises is a simple one around taking in, is about asking for your needs and then taking in your needs. So as babies, some of the muscles that come online are the front of the shoulder, the anterior deltoid, and then also the upper traps. And if you see like a baby when they're laying on their belly and they kind of bring their head up and like they're looking around and they're kind of unstable on their hands, it's not when they can crawl. Those are the muscles that are assisting anyway, the front of the shoulder, the traps, and then a bit of the erector spinae, the muscles are along the spine. So anyway, this is an exercise to activate those muscles. So you might do this, you could do this again with a friend, with a therapist, with a coach. It doesn't work as well if you imagine it, because like I said earlier, all of these experiences, we get imprinted in relation to our primary caregiver. So it really, in relation to someone else is when the real deep healing happens. But you could try it on your own if you don't have anyone to do it with, by just visualizing someone in front of you. So this one is, you think of a need that you want from someone, let's say, and then you lift up your arms here, right? So when you do it, you sweep the arms up, you don't extend this way. So I skipped the step. The first step is you want to inhale. But when you inhale, it's like you want to inhale sideways. So it's almost like you're expanding your ribs outwards. So you're inhaling. And then as you're doing that, you're sweeping your arms up. So inhaling, extending the ribs sideways. And then from here, you're taking in. So you want to squeeze the shoulder blades back. So accessing the upper traps. And then pull in, and you could pull in towards your chest, towards your belly, wherever you want to pull in. And what that's doing is, and this, you'll notice women have an issue with this, is like women are really great at manifesting, but they're often not great at having and holding. So this is because they forget to engage the muscles that hold. Those are the muscles that hold. Right. So you'll see your upper back over here is a little bit hypotense, meaning they're not online as much. So this is going to be a way for you to start getting those muscles to come online a little bit more. So you're asking for what you need, and then you're taking in and holding what you need. Does that all make sense?
Yes.
How does that sit with you?
Sounds, great. I feel excited to see what that does for me. So
excellent. So I have a bunch of exercises for everybody. So sit with those, practice those for a bit. And again, I'd offer you the same that I offered. Jenny, feel free, you have my email address, reach out to me, let me know how things are going, the feed, as you try this and notice when things come up, that's also going to be, those are great indicators of like the progress or where we could work and all that stuff. So we could take it from there.
Thank you. Amazing. Yeah, this was great. You helped me draw so many connections that I just wasn't quite making. So
yay!
Thank you. That was awesome.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. That was so amazing. Thank you, Stacy.
You're very welcome. I hope, Jenny and Dani, that you got some good nuggets out of that. And yeah, please reach out to me as you do the practices to see what comes up. And also just remember that as you start changing and as you start doing these things, change is uncomfortable. So if you start feeling uncomfortable initially, that's probably a good sign. But of course, within the context of you have support as well. You don't have to hold it alone. But that's sometimes people get, when they're like, oh my God, this is uncomfortable, then like they get scared of it. But so just thinking of expanding your capacity of holding those uncomfortable things as your body starts shifting and changing and processing things in new ways. And that's a great sign, actually.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
Yes, discomfort is the sign of transformation. So
exactly.
If you're
I always say when people talk about self-care, I'm like, if it always feels good, you're not doing it right.
yeah. You need a balance, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Stacy, will you remind everyone where they can find you and connect with you and all of that good stuff?
Absolutely. On my website, which is stacyberman.com, STACYBERMAN. And then on Instagram, Stacy Berman, Ph.D.
Amazing. Thank you for your time. This is wonderful. And hopefully people will reach out and get their character armor readings because these are powerful. I love it.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you, Dani. Thank you, Jenny. It's so good to do your readings. Thank you so much.